director Neil Sola is here tonight with us to have a sharing session. So please welcome director Neil Sola.
Hi.
So thank you for bringing to us this fabulous movie, your fiction feature directorial debut, and also congratulations on all the good reviews and showcases at all the acclaimed international film festivals. So I'm gonna start with a couple of questions, and then we can invite audiences to raise their questions. So I'd like to start with the creative concept of the film. How was the journey like to write such a story?
Long. Yeah, it was quite long. You know, I started writing this film 7 years ago. And so I guess that would have been about 2017. And so I kind of took all of the emotions and thoughts and analysis and everything that was happening between maybe when I was in high school all the way until 2016, 2017. And then as I was writing it too, of course, I would include a lot of the ideas, but it's a coming of age story, and a lot of the emotional and details about the friendship and what happens between the group of friends, really I drew from my own experience of spending a lot of time with my friends in high school. Friendship to me was extremely important, and it really kind of formed the basis of who I am now, but also especially back in the day. When I went into university, and I took the same kind of values that I held for friendship into university, but at the same time, I became much more politically conscious and aware during my university years. So this was around 2011 when Fukushima happened. Until then, I was very apolitical. I didn't really think too much about society and what was happening around me in an analytical and structural way. But after Fukushima, I really started to pay attention more. And so over the course of my 4 years in university, I became much more active. I became more involved. I started reading more. And it was a particular time in U.S., I guess, society where, at the same time as these anti-nuclear movements were happening in Japan, there was, 2012, there was Occupy Wall Street. And then a little bit later, Black Lives Matter. And then in 2016, I guess, Trump. And then now, I guess, Trump. And then, at the same time, I would go back and forth between U.S. and Japan. And in Japan, it was also quite interesting because I think for the first time in maybe like 50 or 60 years, there was a really big movement, anti-nuclear movement, and that also led to, there was a really awful kind of a racist demonstrations happening, especially around 2014. And in response to that, there was a lot of kind of like anti-racism kind of counter protests. And so, to the 2010s really was like for me especially, just a very political, I guess, season, if you will. And so I really took those emotions with me. In university, I had a really close friend who I slowly grew apart from, and then I also distancing other friends as well because of political differences. And because those, for me, friendship was so important to me, it was extra devastating to have to lose friends due to political differences, even though I can intellectually understand why those things need to happen. And so those were the emotions that I was trying to capture for the film.
Right, as you mentioned about political awareness, especially in Hong Kong as well, this film is quite close to home, as the youngsters also has this political awareness they're rising. And I was just wondering about the cast ensemble. How did it take the story? I mean, in terms of like political awareness, and then as well they are like coming from different ethnicity. How was the experience to work with them?
Yeah, it was a great experience. One of the things that at the same time as kind of working through a lot of these emotions that I want to capture, at the same time I was really researching the history of Japan, you know, and particularly there was this one earthquake that happened in 1923 called the Great Kanto Earthquake. And it was one of the most devastating earthquakes that happened in Tokyo in modern times. But then what's often forgotten is that actually it sparked a really horrible massacre of Zainichi Korean people, or Korean people. And it was due to colonial resentment, racism. Really the root cause of it was colonialism. And so as I was thinking about the structure of Japanese colonialism and what about it has continued today, you know, I was really thinking that actually the Japanese identity itself is very much constructed around foreign versus not foreign, because these Koreans and Chinese people as well, and also different people from countries that had been colonized by Japan were originally the subjects of the emperor, were considered Japanese citizens. But then after the war, kind of one-sidedly, a lot of these formerly colonized peoples were considered foreigners, and they had to register as a foreigner in Japan. And so really the divide between foreigner and Japanese person today is very much rooted in this. And so in thinking about this, I really wanted to present a society in the future, because Japan is now on the brink of a moment where it's either going to open up its borders more or not. I wanted to present a future where a kind of much more diverse identity of what Japanese means is just present in a really normal and a normalized way. So, you know, I took a lot of time casting, and the most important thing was really intuition for me. I auditioned a lot of people, but every single time we decided on one of the actors, it was really just an immediate, love at first sight. You know, I knew this person is going to be in the film type of thing. And what was extra miraculous is that they became really good friends over the course of workshopping, but then also throughout the shooting of the film itself. And the story I also like to tell is that, you know, Yuta and Ko, the actors who play Yuta and Ko, truly became best friends through the shooting of the film, and now they are roommates. They live together, so they're actually best friends. If you go to their Instagram stories, you can watch Happy End too. It continues after.
Yeah, their energy is really lovely in the film. And also there's one thing I'd like to ask about is the voiceover game they like to play in the film. Sometimes they make up funny dialogues or conversations to make fun of their friends or the teachers. So how did you design this? Because this is really lighthearted, but also kind of an imaginary layer of the plot.
Yeah. We were, as I was writing the script, me and my kind of collaborators, producers, one of whom is here, Aiko Masubuchi, right there, is. We were discussing this, and for me, I had a problem that I needed to solve in terms of the story, which is how to explain the background of all of these characters very fast. And so for me, this device of the voiceover is actually a very expository one, where they kind of just tell you what's going on, how they feel about the principal, or what Tomo's up to, but I wanted to couch it in something else because explanation is boring. And Aiko, apparently, when she was in high school as a kid, she kind of was doing those things, kind of voice over their friends and things like this. And so that was Aiko's idea. And so we all kind of collaborated together and brought our own kind of memories of what it was like to hang out with friends and joke around. And because the sense of humor and comedy was also very important to me, to have moments of levity and to actually portray kids as kids is very important.
So I'd like to open up to the floor and see if anyone would like to ask a question. Hi, can I have a mic, please?
Hello, director. I really like your film theme because I think it discusses the issue so widely. and with different perspective. And I really like your theme of bringing out that it's important to have our own thinking. And one thing I want to ask about is at the end of the story, there is a shot that the two boys are standing and in the middle, and they are going to and one of the boy is catching the collar of another boy, and I see that you designed to freeze the screen for a few seconds, and I think there's a very special design. And I want to ask, since maybe that motion can present the dilemma of the boys that they are facing, but why will you design to freeze the screen for a few seconds? Thank you.
So yeah, so actually that was Yuta kind of pinching the nipple. You know, Yuta was always doing that throughout the whole film. So actually that was Yuta's way of kind of saying it's all okay, you know. But the reason why I froze it, you know, one of my goals for the ending for the film was to try to make an ending that made you laugh and then cry. And there's something, and we were really working with a lot of different types of endings. You know, there was actually even an extra scene after that final shot, but we decided to cut that out. And one day, my editor and producer as well, Albert Tolan, we were, you know, figuring it out. There was no freeze frame. We watched it, and it was like, it was working, but maybe there's something else. And then as a joke, Albert decided to put freeze frame and then put really, really exaggerated dramatic music over the freeze frame. And we watched it, and it was a joke at first, you know, he thought it was really funny. And it was really funny. And then as I started to watch the music play and then that kind of seeing the image of Yuta pinching Ko's nipple, I started to cry a little bit because it really kind of shows that Yuta, even though he understands that something has changed, now he's really making an effort to tell Ko that it's going to be okay. That although their friendship may have ended in a way, in this way that will never be the same ever again, their connection is still going to continue to some degree. And at the moment, you know, in the scene, Ko is also really feeling bad about not standing up with Yuta at the graduation ceremony. And he's sort of feeling like he should reach out and not reach out. And so Yuta really takes the first step to continue the relationship. And so to freeze it at that moment, but then it unfreezes and then they go their separate ways, really kind of brought a little bit of hope for me that maybe in the future they will still continue to be friends. And that is a hope that I sort of needed for myself as well, because, you know, for all the friends that I've definitely lost in touch with, I do, part of me really wants to get back in touch with them, you know? So that's why, for me, the ending really worked. And we chose to keep it, even though Albert said it was a joke. I was like, no, I think this is great, yeah.
Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you, director. I like your movie very much, and I find that the movie is happening in the near future, and there are many earthquakes in Japan, and it seems that it follows the tradition of Japanese sci-fi movie since 1960, just like the thinking of Japan, Godzilla, and because of the risk of being destroyed by the natural disaster, so everyone should follow the same discipline and the same rule in order to protect the social collective security. So what's the relation between the natural disaster and the suppress of freedom in the movie? Thank you very much. I like your movie very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think in the film it was maybe a little bit difficult to follow, but this thing called the emergency decree comes into power at the very, I mean, it's a world in which the emergency decree becomes part of the constitution. In reality, in Japan, the emergency decree has not yet been amended to become part of the constitution, but the LDP, which is this kind of, it was the ruling party for like 50 years after the war that ended with Kishida, basically. They, Abe Shinzo especially had been trying to incorporate this emergency decree into the constitution, which would vastly expand the power of the prime minister's office in times of emergencies. It's actually very similar to how the Nazis came into power, and in any kind of nation state, I think, in the wrong hands, these kinds of emergencies and moments of catastrophe are used to further the goals of whatever kind of, let's say, like dictatorial minds that are in the government. And I think it's kind of true of almost any kind of catastrophe, but really what these catastrophes bring are a vacuum of power. In big earthquakes, even during COVID, or big hurricanes in the case of the US, suddenly there becomes a big kind of emptiness or vacuum of power. And whatever kind of organization or groups that is the most organized at the time will always fill the needs of that vacuum. And if it happens to be the most organized kind of groups at the moment, if that happens to be rooted in colonial racism and resentment as it was in 1923, massacres can happen. Whereas if a society is based on mutual aid and social justice and kind of grassroots organizing of kind of communities knowing each other and knowing each other's needs, then maybe the shape of that is very different, as was the case to some degree in Kobe in 1995. There was a big Kobe earthquake, and that's also where we filmed this film. But I'm sure there were a lot of issues as well, but there was one really amazing kind of a hopeful thing that I heard from doing some research in Kobe, which is that Kobe has a lot of kind of non-Japanese speaking population. It has a lot of different communities in Kobe. And very quickly, right after the earthquake, all these communities needed information about how to, get by and survive the post-earthquake kind of catastrophe. And citizens came together to do, like, for example, multilingual radio. And this was a very direct thing that the citizens decided to do on their own without a state having to tell them that they needed to do it. Just because they just needed that. And there are a lot of cases of these catastrophes really creating opportunities for this like direct action, mutual aid networks to grow. And to me, that is a really hopeful shape of a society if that can continue. But unfortunately, because usually the most organized groups in the moments of catastrophe are the state, and so they really step in. And so those kinds of things really depend on how the state really treats the people. And if it doesn't treat them well, if the state is racist, or if the state has other agendas, then these moments of catastrophe become horrible moments, And so I think it really depends. But I think every time there's a big earthquake, the LDP is trying to push forward this emergency decree that allows them to use moments of emergencies to expand its power. And I think that's really dangerous, which is why I wrote that into the film.
So I think we can take one more question.
Hello, director. I noticed that in the ending credits, there is one name, Huang Qi. Is that the director for the Best Pictures last year in the Golden Horse Prize?
Yes.
And also noticed there's a logo from Giraffe Studio, which I suppose is from Singapore.
Yeah.
How do they get involved in this film? Could you introduce a little bit?
Yeah, so Huang Ji is somebody that I became connected to through her partner Ryuji Otsuka, who they're the film kind of directing duo. They made Stonewalling last year. And when we were writing the kind of Chinese language dialogue, I just needed somebody to make sure that some of the AD, I guess, voiceover and the dialogue was right and was working really well as intended in the story. So at the very beginning in the club scene, I think you heard a little bit of Chinese, but that's what Huang Ji helped us with. So I really thank her and also Ryuji Otsuka very much. And Giraffe Pictures is so Anthony Chen, if you may notice, was involved in the as a producer in the film. And very early on, when we were developing the project, Aiko, producer here, reached out to Anthony for advice and help, and Anthony really, really supported the project and then came on board. And so that's why also Giraffe Pictures is part of the project.
So time is running up. So thank you again for directing your for your sharing, and also again thank you all for your participation. Hope to see you all at next screening. Have a good night.
Thanks for coming, everybody.